Welcome, everybody, to the A Little Less Fear podcast. I'm your producer and host of the show, Dr. Lino Martinez. This is your motivational podcast of people's incredible journeys. Oh, yeah, let's do this. Welcome back, everybody, to the A Little Less Fear podcast. Today, I would love to welcome another Los Angeles neighbor here, Dr. Adi Jaffe. Did I pronounce your last name correct? Is it Jaffe?
So the first name is actually pronounced Adi. Like pretend I know you had never have,
Okay.
but pretend you got a
Oh,
really
okay.
bad grade on the test. So it's Adi
Oh.
Jaffe.
Okay, a D, and then Jaffe.
Jaffe. Yeah.
Jaffe, okay. I love how you said that. All right. So passionate about the role of shame in destroying lives, he's made it his life's mission to help reduce the stigma of mental health in this country. Dr. Adi Jaffe is the author of Unhooked and is a world-renowned expert on mental health, addiction, relationships, and shame. He is the founder of IGNTD Recovery, which is a smart, personalized, adaptive recovery system. So nice to meet you. Welcome to A Little Less Fear podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Martinez. I'm empowered by your story and excited to have our version of it.
I'm excited for it too, and I'm empowered by your presence and your energy, and even more so that you're not so far away from me. So how incredible how energy gets aligned the way it has and the way it is. So tell us a little bit
Absolutely.
about your story. You're passionate about the role of shame in destroying people's lives. Why shame?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm an immigrant, first generation, moved to this country when I was 14 years old, and I moved from Israel, which is a bizarre thing to say now. It's become so political just to say that alone. But moved from Israel right into high school, and for me, there's something going on in my brain from the time I was 10 where I struggled fitting in. I never really felt like I was enough. I was always questioning my yeah, my role among others. And so there was a ton of social anxiety happening in my brain for many, many, many years. And around the age of 14, I found alcohol as a way to deal with that in a sleepaway camp. And I started relying on that more and more heavily. So I went from not drinking at all till 14 to pretty much drinking every weekend. Found weed when I was 16. By the time made it to college, I was smoking and drinking every single day. Got heavier and heavier during college. Started finding harder drugs in the middle of college, especially around a breakup. I mean, it's funny. I call it a bad breakup, but it was, one of those that first breakup, right? The
Oh
first time
yeah.
you date somebody you really love. It's been a year and a half, 2 years you've been together, and then the classic all-American college story. We went to two different universities. She found somebody in the university, broke up with me, and I went into a tailspin, started leaning on heavier and heavier drugs, and really by the time I was 18, 19 years old, I was using anything I could. Found meth, had moved out to LA from upstate New York, found meth, which really was the drug that took me down. Now I was using a lot of drugs, and because using a lot of drugs it gets expensive, and I did not come from a family that had a ton of money, I had to start figuring out more and more, I'll call them creative ways to come up with the money for my drugs. And that led me to selling drugs because I realized at some point that if I just buy them at bulk, then I get to make money off my friends and I using. I did that for a number of years, got pretty good at it, but because I got good at it, I had an unlimited amount of drugs, and so my addiction just took me further and further and further down. Um, I don't talk about this always, but by the last year, 2 years that I was at UCLA getting my bachelor's at that point, this is about 1999, 98. Um, I was smoking meth in the bathroom between classes just to stay awake in between classes. So that's the place it took me to. I was experiencing some psychosis because I'd been up for 3, 4 days at a time. It was pretty bad. Um, got out of school and I was dealing and making tens of thousands of dollars a month selling drugs. So I didn't go get a job because why would I, in my mind? And then
But
about
you
two,
still
3 years,
continued your education, even though you were.
I graduated, but barely. I graduated my bachelor's on a technicality. I
Okay.
remember getting the call one day because I left school with one class between me and a degree. But no matter how many times I tried, I was just so out of sorts at that point. I couldn't make it to one class. I just couldn't do it. So 1999, I stopped going to school. In 2000, I got a call saying that one of the elective classes that I had taken now counts for my major in psychology. And so I'm actually eligible to graduate, which was a stroke of luck, a godsend, I don't
Right.
know, call it whatever you want. But that was a year after I stopped going to school. So I got my degree then and just kept selling and pretending to make music. I had a recording studio that I was selling out of it. Making music was the cover, but I was really just getting high all the time. Fast forward about 2 more years, it's getting worse and worse and worse. I mean, everybody I know at that point is either a drug dealer buying drugs from me or kind of that classic, cliched girls that I would hang out with because they either wanted the drugs or wanted the money. That became my world. And
Dr. Jaffe, I'm sorry, I have a question. So by this point now, you had been an addict for about 15 years, would you say?
it started
You
heavily
said you were
relying on
14.
substances by the time I was in college. So I'd say
Okay.
17, no, even in high school, 16 to 17 is really when it started,
Hmm.
but a good 9 years.
Okay.
Since college, like so since 18, 19 to 26, which is where this part of the story ends,
Hmm.
I wasn't sober at all. I mean, I don't think you could say that I was sober for more than a day or two at a time
Hmm.
at all during that period. And the last few years, I wasn't sober for an hour. I was using, would fall asleep. The moment I would wake up, I'd start using again, and that kind of would repeat on that cycle. Um, but yeah, I was 25 years old, a couple of days away from my 25th birthday, when I got in a really bad motorcycle accident, broke my leg, and while I was on the stretcher, this was in Beverly Hills. Um, the Beverly Hills cops knew me. They had arrested me about 3 other times in Beverly Hills with drugs. Took the jacket off of me, found a half a pound of cocaine in there, and
While you're at the hospital?
well, they found it off the bike. But yeah, by the time I got to the hospital, I was one of those guys handcuffed to the bed
Mm.
that you see sometimes in movies, and you're like, who the
Yeah,
hell would get arrested
right.
in a hospital? And I was one of those guys. So I'm
Wow.
handcuffed to the bed. Took about 2 days in the hospital because my tibia and my fibula was broken. So when the cops realized like I can't walk, I mean I'm not an escape flight risk because I literally
Mhm.
can't walk.
Right.
They took the cuffs off, but I was still essentially under arrest. And the next 3 months were spent with me trying to evade the cops very unintelligently, and them continuing to come after me. 3 months later, there was a SWAT team arrest at
Wow.
my house. And that's actually what opens up. So my latest book is called Unhooked, and what opens up the book is that SWAT team arrest.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So the SWAT team is so once is you said you were 26 now at this point?
I just turned, no, this was November. So I just turned 25 when they arrested me. I was 26 when I went to jail.
Okay. So you get arrested by the SWAT team and what's going on in your mind at this point?
It's interesting. I had lived this life for so long, right? I mean, you think about by the time you're in your mid 20s, 5, 6 years of your life is almost anything you can remember. So really the initial thought was just, oh crap, what do I have to do now to get out of this, right? It's kind
Hmm.
of you're living this very moment to moment existence where there's no long-term goals, there's no understanding. I had no marketable skills. I was a drug dealer. Like that's all I mean, I wasn't dumb, but I was a drug dealer. That's all I knew how to do.
Yeah.
So really the number one thing for me in the moment was calling my lawyer and trying to get out of jail. Um, it's just that gradually it became pretty clear that was not going to happen, right?
Yeah.
There was no way I was going to stay out of jail this time. I'd served a day here, 3 days there, but I'd never really served time. And when that became obvious, came the next stage. And that's, I credit my lawyer and some of the other people around me with getting me to really understand that if I kept going the way that I was going then, which means smoking meth all day, I was 124 pounds, I'm 165 here sitting
Wow.
in front of you. I mean, 40 pounds less, I was a skeleton. And what they got me to understand is, look, if you want to stay out of jail, you got to clean up your act. You got to kick the drugs. And so I went into rehab, not because I wanted to get sober, not because I wanted to straighten
Mhm.
out my life, but because I wanted to stay out of prison. And I was looking at 15 to
Yeah.
20 years in prison, and rehab seemed like a much better option. And for the first time, it took me a few months, if I'm honest, and there's more to the story, but it took me a few months to really understand that concept that, staying out of prison is a long-term game, right? And in order to do that, there were going to be a lot of other things I needed to do along the way that I may not like, I may not enjoy in the moment, I may even disagree with, but those are momentary thoughts, feelings, and what matters more is the goal. What matters more is what I'm going after, right? In a way, I almost assume like what happened to you probably when you started facing all these medical procedures and it's like, okay, well, my goal is A, to survive, but B, have the best, most thriving life that I can. So there may be 17 surgeries along that way, which is terrifying, right? Each one of those by themselves is terrifying. But if those are the steps I have to take to get the life I want,
Right.
then screw it. That's what I've got to do. And that's
So
that's where
basically,
I found myself.
you surrendered.
Yeah. You surrender to the process. You surrender to other people who may know how to get you where you're going a little bit better than you know at that moment, right?
So what happened in jail?
Well, first of all, I had to fight my case for a year. And, at this point in my life now, when we're speaking, I work with a lot of executives. I work with a lot of really successful people. So a lot of them haven't been to jail, but the commonality is that many of them, I would actually say probably all of them, have had a moment in their life where they were faced with an outcome, a result, an experience that was terrifying, that was antithetical to the way they saw their life, that went against everything they wanted. So that could be their wife threatening to leave them or leaving them. That could be being fired from a job, losing a business, right? Something terrifying happens, and that makes you pause and reconsider really everything you knew about life, right? Because
Oh yeah.
you were doing your best up until that moment, and then all of a sudden
Right.
life smacked you upside the face.
Right.
So jail was that for me in a way, right? The SWAT team came. Um, I'm trying to sort out how to get out of this. It's becoming more and more obvious that it's not going to be an easy path. And I knew how far down I dug myself, but the cops wanted one thing. They wanted me to give them names of other people, and I was not going to do that for two reasons. Number one, some of these people I considered my friends, and I had made the choice to sell drugs. Nobody forced me into it. Number two, I didn't really want to look over my shoulder for the rest of my life and be afraid that somebody's going to shoot me in the back of the head because I'd snitched
Yeah,
them
no
out. So
kidding. Right.
both of those reasons were good reasons to not give a name. And so then it just fell on me, right? And I
Hmm.
think that's, you talked about being humble and you talked about kind of having resignation, giving into whatever was going to happen, letting go of the control. I think the other piece, along with the humility for me, was really just acceptance, right? Acceptance that I was in a place I didn't want to be in, but that there was going to be a path out. And I was
Hmm.
going to have to follow a very non-linear uh, path to that place. And so got sent to rehab, went to rehab, did pretty well there for about a month. And then the wheels came off. I started using every day with the moment that they let me go back to work, used in rehab for 2 months, got kicked out of rehab. I was now homeless. I'd gone from having all this money to living in my car. And and gradually more and more what landed on me was this is my responsibility.
Hmm.
I can't blame anybody else. I can't turn this on anybody else. I've got to figure out what to do next, and I have to own the outcome over and over and over.
Oh yeah.
And that was a moment of awakening for me, right? I was very comfortable blaming others
Hmm.
before that. I was very comfortable feeling invincible even if I wasn't. I was very comfortable pretending that I lived outside of the rules that everybody else lived by.
Hmm.
And there was life serving me a pretty harsh dose of reality. And so the moment I took accountability in a humble way, in a way that wasn't about exerting control over the world, but instead about learning the lessons that it's teaching me and then applying them as quickly as I could. I found the next treatment center. I started doing really, really well there. It wasn't easy, but I started doing really well. By the time I went back in front of the judge, because you go back every month, and I was cleaned up, my lawyer was starting to talk about, okay, now we're talking about maybe potentially going down to 3 years from 15 to 18 years. Maybe we're going to do better. And I kept showing up and I kept doing the work that needed to happen. I was very fortunate when it came time to sentencing. I did something called an open plea. And an open plea is when you say, look, I'll accept the charges and I'm kind of bending the knee to the court, to the judge,
Hmm.
saying, here's what I've done, show me some mercy, right? If you
Right.
will. So the judge, because I essentially accepted 9 felonies out of the 13 that I was initially charged with,
Hmm.
he could have sent me away for 15 years easily. But he ended up giving me an 8 year sentence, split up into 7 plus 1. So I had to do 1 year. And as long as I did everything okay during that 1 year and then never failed probation, I would never have to serve the other 7 years of my sentence.
That's a pretty good deal,
It was a pretty
right?
good deal. It was a
Yeah,
pretty
I'll
good deal.
say.
And so
Really good
I
deal.
worked really hard to do nothing wrong during that year. I cleared about 4 more years of probation without doing anything wrong and then got my record expunged. But it taught me a lot during that time about what humility plus accountability can do for you.
Yes. And so thank you so much for sharing all that. As you're telling me all this, I can see it all in my head like a movie. It's really incredible that you lived through all that and you're here to tell the story. It's really remarkable. And
Mm.
so you learned a lot about humility, accountability, and having to own what's next, personal responsibility. How do you see humility now?
Mm. I think to me, humility is accepting both the incredible power and capacity that we have, and then at the same time, the fact that we are one of billions of people, each of whom is equally special, worthy, etc. And
Hmm.
so that, being able to both recognize our potential and our capacity, but not
Hmm.
excluding ourselves from others and not feeling like we're above much that happens around us, right? I think that's where ego
Hmm.
can get in the way sometimes.
Oh yeah, right.
And that's still, that sense of humility is still something that I try to take into every day experience. And again, I mentioned this before, I work with a lot of ultra high net worth individuals, really, really successful people. And it's something that I try to get them to bring into their own way of living.
You
You
try to
talked
get
about,
them to bring humility into their way of living.
yeah, you talked about that Buddhist experience that you had. And to me, that's one of the most beautiful teaching of meditation and Buddhism is, again, this beautiful combination, right? If you meditate, if you become conscious, if you take on these practices, which is an act of humility, right? Because you have to say, I'm not more important than the practice, right? The meditation
Exactly.
is the tool,
Right.
but the meditation is the tool through which my capacity, my beauty,
Yes.
um, my greatness can flow. And so you're not limiting, you're not putting yourself down, right? It's not about pretending you are nothing and you have nothing. It's about recognizing that it's through these practices that you are no better than, that you get to bring the most beautiful version of yourself from. And so that's, we've all worked with people who don't have humility.
Oh yeah.
And we've all been around people who are not humble. And I think you see it. You get to see something in a person where even when they are great, even when their talent is massive, even when they are genius level um, scientists or entrepreneurs or thinkers, philosophers, musicians, when they don't have that element of humility,
Mhm.
it takes something away from the value that they bring to everybody around them, right? Because somehow they set themselves apart or they believe that they are better than others. And so for communal relationships, for the ability to relate to others and be in deep intimacy with other people and connect, whether as their leader or a colleague or a peer, I think humility ends up being a really, really important feature.
It really is an incredible feature. I love how you brought up the potential aspect, the capacity aspect, equal and worthy, and other people are basically we're all equal to their potential and their capacity. And I also love how you said that you get to bring in the most beautiful part of yourself with humility. What would you say is your most beautiful part of yourself?
Mm. Um, if I think about the things that bring me and the people around me the most value and repeatedly just keep showing themselves as the ones that I appreciate, that make me feel good and that make the people around me feel good. it's when, because it's not always true, but it's when I'm able to sit in deep empathy, in deep connection with another human being. And we talked about shame before, and remove all judgment, remove all expectation, remove all weight from the
Right.
relationship, but really be there. I already used the word empathy, but in full understanding of the other being. And that's my favorite thing to do when I coach others is to take somebody who's struggling in the room and who feels misunderstood, feels isolated, feels alone, maybe feels worthless or at least damaged, and be able to make them feel safe and accepted.
That is incredible and that is beautiful. And I'm glad that you're able to feel into that beauty, that inner beauty of yourself. And I can see that and I can feel that. And you're in that energy right now as we speak.
Yeah, it's my favorite thing about podcasts with other people who've gone through deep struggle. Um, I think there is something. It's a beautiful thing, and hopefully, somebody listening right now, this gives you hope. When you make it out of these deep, poor life struggles, feels like it's like a bone. When it heals, it's stronger than it was before it broke, right? Now, that doesn't mean it's not painful, like you said in that Buddhist
Right.
meditation that you sat through. It doesn't mean it's not painful, but if you can keep that consciousness, then you can recognize sometimes, oh, this is the break that it's going to cause the strength on the other side.
I love that. This is the break that's going to cause the strength. Wow. And I have to write that down. So I have a question going back to shame because originally that was the sentence that I started with. And so I want to dive into that. Why are you passionate about the role of shame and how shame destroys people's lives? On the quite opposite of talking about humility, but I do
Yeah.
feel that on the other side and the opposite side of shame is humility. But I'd like
Yeah.
to
And
hear it from
ironically,
you. What's that?
yeah. So ironically, I don't think they're opposites. I think what ends up happening is, look, the most narcissistic seeming,
Mhm.
most egocentric people on the face of the planet are really incredibly insecure.
Yeah,
Right. So
sure.
when you meet somebody who always has to prove to you how amazing they are, it's because they don't think they're amazing at all. Right.
Yes.
So there's shame in there. There's hidden shame. And And most people who have shame, shame is a really caustic, really painful emotion to feel deeply. So when you feel it, you have to hide it. You have to mask it somehow.
Hmm.
And for some people, they mask it by hiding themselves physically, right? They disappear. They become hermits. They don't want to see anybody else. And some people do the opposite. They respond by almost attacking, right? They're going to say, "Oh, you think I'm weak? Let me show you how strong I really am," right? And
Right.
it's a counterintuitive but pretty common response to feeling unworthy. It's this show, it's a peacocking kind of effect, right? It's like,
Sure.
oh, no, I'm not going to let anybody understand that I feel weak, so I'll look like the strongest thing on the face of the planet. And both the hiding and the hermiting and the disappearing and the peacocking, they're both elements of internalized shame, right? Feeling like you're not enough. So you don't want to be seen or you want to make sure nobody ever sees you as weak.
Right.
At the time when I was younger, I said I struggled with a lot of social anxiety. I always felt less than. I always felt like I didn't belong. And it took me honestly to my 30s, long after that arrest, to realize that even the drug use started from that social anxiety. It wasn't about drugs. It was about trying to find a way to feel like I'm connected to others and feel like I am less worried about what others think about me. And it started with girls, but honestly, it went pretty broad. Um, And so when I think about that, there was an element of comparison. And in that comparison, I always felt less than. And there's an
Sure.
element of shame in that, right? I'm not enough. I'm
Right.
not, I'm not smart enough. I don't speak well enough. I'm not good looking enough. I'm not popular enough, right? The I'm not enough adjectives were broad. There was a long list of them when I was younger, certainly. And so it took me a while, but what I started realizing is that that is my judgment. I think a lot of people, when they feel shame, they feel like they're being judged from the outside. And
Right.
that might be true, but it's much, much, much less relevant than the judgment you set on yourself.
This is the truth.
Um, I have to imagine that when you were going through your struggles, when you couldn't talk, or when you had to go through these procedures that I'm sure affected you physically in an endless number of ways.
Absolutely.
If you ever got stuck in one of these shame spirals, the fear was, what will other people think? And, what are people going to say when they realize that I can't speak? And what I've realized over time is those things, they never serve us.
Right.
They never serve our greater good. They hold us back. They hold us back from being the best version of ourselves. And
Mhm.
I've worked with enough people right now where I can tell you it doesn't matter if you were the 22-year-old who just got out of prison and was sexually assaulted as a child, or the kid born with a silver spoon who's now a multi-billionaire, jet setting around the world. All different sorts of people have these shame
Oh
experiences where they
yeah.
don't feel like they're enough. And
Hmm.
the feeling is very similar, and the impact that it has on us emotionally is very, very similar.
So how do we bring humility into the picture of somebody that's experiencing not enough equals shame?
I mean, the way I do it, and that's not to say that it's the only way to do it, is three different elements. And so it's actually in the book I talk about for any behavioral change. I think you need to explore why the behavior is happening. You need to have acceptance, which we'll talk about here in a second, about what it is that makes even some of the most negative behaviors you engage in likely for you right now. And then you can transform, right? So explore, accept, transform. I use the acronym EAT,
Hmm.
um, right? Explore, accept, transform. Acceptance is the part where you reduce shame. So
Hmm.
number one is compassion for self and others.
Oh yeah.
Number two is forgiveness for self and others.
Hmm.
And part of acceptance is acknowledgement, and this is hard for some people, but acknowledgement that even the most damaged behaviors often emanate from you just trying to do your best in every moment based
Oh
on what
yeah.
you know. Um, that's hard for people who don't feel like they're enough because they believe for a moment that saying, if this is me doing my best, then it can't get better. But that's not actually what it means. What it
Right.
means is I don't know right now how to do better, and I'm learning. There's a growth mindset. I don't know how many people have read Carol Dweck's book Mindset, but there's a growth mindset component to this, which is I am currently here, but I'm trying to get here, and there is a path. There's a there's a line. There are probably multiple paths that can connect where I am to where I want to go. Just the fact that I'm stuck here right now doesn't mean this is where I'll be for the rest of my life. But if I have a fixed mindset, as Dr. Dweck talks about, it is less likely that I'll be able to grow out of it. So the first thing we have to do is just have acceptance that this is our current status, but it's not the end. This
Hmm.
is the next beginning. And then compassion comes in pretty importantly. So compassion for ourselves and others. There's a lot of work.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Self-compassion is its own area of psychology. And so that involves normalizing,
Yeah.
acknowledging, and then kind of recognizing that there's a way out of your current state. Compassion for others. I talked about blaming others for where we are right now. Both forgiveness and compassion for others is a really, really big component of acceptance and shame reduction, in my opinion. It is very likely that some other people have damaged you and have caused you pain in the past. For everybody listening, including yourself and certainly including myself. But if we keep sitting in that pain 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years later, we're carrying the weight and it's damaging us at this point. And
Oh
so,
yeah. And also at
in
that point, I mean, if you're constantly carrying that negative weight, that's what causes diseases and illness.
massive disease,
Yeah.
yeah, stress and inflammation and all those
Yeah.
things, right? So forgiveness and compassion for self and others are a way to let go of that weight, right?
Yeah.
Not forgiving. You're not saying this thing didn't happen, but you're saying I'm releasing you from the blame for it. I'm releasing me from the blame for how I reacted at the time. And again, I've worked with people who are, if you look at their life outside, everybody wants that life, but they've got regrets. They've got people who hurt them. They may be divorced. Some of them are divorced multiple times, and they hold on to grudges and resentment for those past relationships. And it's 20 years later, and it's holding them back from joy. And so, for me, again, acceptance is around acknowledgement, compassion for self and others, and forgiveness for self and others.
I love that. That's beautiful. And so I also love this acronym that you have, EAT. So this is the acceptance part. What's the explore part?
Yeah. So, we talked about shame. It'll come back here as well. For most people, when something really bad happens, their first inclination is to bury it,
Hmm.
avoid it, run away from it, ignore it, numb it with alcohol, drugs, or porn, or technology, or something like that.
Hmm.
Most people try to get away from the pain of what I call negative outcomes, but of results in their life that they are unhappy about. They get fired, they go get drunk at the bar, right? Their wife leaves them, they go find somebody else to be with, and they get wasted to not have to feel the feelings. Explore is about doing the exact opposite. Again, you talked about meditation. Explore is about sitting with the discomfort.
Yeah.
Explore is about saying, what about this feels terrible to me?
So actually asking yourself the questions when you're
Yeah,
sitting
and I
with
give
yourself.
I give yeah, I give a model in the book. I call it the sparrow model. Stimulus, perception, activation, response, outcome. Every set of behaviors that happens in your life starts with some stimulus. Something happens in the outside world or inside your brain that gets you started. But you don't respond to the stimulus. You don't respond to the trigger. You actually respond to your perception of the trigger. I give this example in the book. If I'm walking down my street and somebody drives down, rolls their window down and say, "Hey, a-hole," right? Just yells that at me driving by. Um, that's an event. That's a trigger, right? That's a stimulus. If I think that's if my perception of it is that's some random dude driving down the street, um, and they're disrespecting me. If that's the way I look at it, I might get angry. I might get aggravated. I might start chasing them, right? That's one path. If I think to myself, oh my God, that's my neighbor Gary, and he's just kind of playing with me and joking while driving down the street, I have a completely different reaction. I may laugh, right? I may yell something friendly back or play back with him, right? Totally different reactions in my body, in my mind, an entirely different set of behaviors. Same exact thing happened. It's my perception of it. So I've known people, somebody listening right now might relate to this. Like I've known people who would start a fight with somebody at a bar because they stepped on their toe or like dirtied their shoe. And the perception they would have was that there's a personal attack in there somewhere, right? Somebody disrespecting me. So stimulus, something happens. Perception, you have an idea about how to interpret the thing that happened. The third part is activation, SPA. Activation is something happens in your body in response to the stimulus and the perception of it. You feel a
Mhm.
feeling. Your chest starts tightening. Your breath shallows. You relax. You get agitated. Right? Something happens in your body.
Mhm.
The response is actually a way to try to deal with the physiological experience you're having in your body. Your chest
Oh,
tightens, you go into
yeah.
fight or flight. The response is there to try to figure out how to sort out that feeling that started overtaking your body. You take a drink, you go to a boxing class, you go for a run, you scream at somebody in the middle of the street, right? Those are all responses. Once you act, there's an outcome. Something happens in the world. So SPARO, Sparrow, explains to us why we do what we do. And what I try to help people do is when something negative happens, when a really bad negative outcome happens, if you just pause for a second and try to see where along that path did I just struggle, right? Where is it that I'm feeling the pain? Then you go into acceptance, accepting that you were doing your best, trying to find compassion and forgiveness. And when the activation slows down, when you get out of that fight or flight mode, you can now move to transform and say, okay, let's say my perception was that somebody personally offended me, and that's why I got angry, and that's why I started a fight.
Dr. Jaffe, I have a question before you continue, just because it's ruminating my
Please.
mind here. Continuing on there with the perception, is there a difference between perception from your standpoint and your book and your experience between perception and belief?
Perceptions are um, an after effect of the belief.
Okay,
Yeah,
got it. Okay, great.
yeah. So beliefs are kind of the groundwork that sets, right? It's like the reservoir
Mm-hmm.
where the perceptions come out of. So if I believe I'm never good enough, and somebody looks at me weird,
Yeah.
I may feel like I'm being judged. My perception might be that I'm being judged, but it's coming out of that belief that I'm not
Mhm.
good enough. Exactly.
So it's like the boiling water is the belief, and The what do you call it? The I guess the
Perception.
smoke. The what's that?
The perception is the smoke, the steam.
The
Yeah, that's a
steam.
I
There you
love
go. Yeah, the steam. Yeah.
I love that metaphor. Yeah,
Mm,
and look, the reality of it is we all have beliefs. I call them in my book and in classes I lead, I call them kind of the lenses, the biases that we see the
mhm.
world through. Um, we all have them. We can't get rid of them. Ironically, we can change them. It just takes a lot of work. But once you change a belief, you may remember that you had a previous belief, but you can't hold on to it. You can't have two opposing beliefs about the same idea at the same time, right?
Yeah. Yeah, the
So,
different vibrations. Yeah.
and we've all gone through it. A lot of people, when we talk about beliefs, a lot of people say, well, you may call them beliefs, but I can't change the way I see the world and how I am. And I say, well, you've changed it all the time throughout your own life. I mean,
Constantly,
it
right?
happens all the
Through
time.
your resiliency. Yeah.
Yeah, well, the moment you realize that you can, you now see more opportunities to do it. But the biggest example I give everybody is almost everybody listening right now had a time where they believed in Santa Claus,
Hey, I still do.
right? And when you were a kid and you believed in Santa Claus, you lived in a world where Santa Claus existed.
Right.
And the gifts, on Christmas Day were put there by Santa Claus. And the writing on the cards was for Santa Claus. And then something happened. Either a friend told you, your parents blew the cover, you saw a movie that explained to you that, Santa Claus was not real. Something happened that blew the lid off the cover.
Mm.
And now your belief about Santa Claus changed. And then you woke up Saturday morning knowing the gifts were from your parents and your loved ones, not from Santa Claus. Nothing changed in reality between the day before and the day after your belief changed. The only thing that changed was your understanding of reality.
Yeah. Right.
And the same way that you had that, you can change your belief about how worthy you are. You can change your belief about whether you'll have enough money to survive or whether you'll find love, whether you deserve to find love, all those elements that are really deeply entrenched beliefs for many of us are changeable. The question is, how do you change them?
And speaking of how do you change it, I'm going back to your acronym of explore, accept, and transform. How do you transform then?
Yeah. So there are a bunch of different techniques, and I talk about a ton of them in the book. Um, One of the easiest for people to start out with when they're still struggling with this concept is modeling. I'm certainly not the first person to point this out, but if you can find other people in the world who are capable of doing the thing that you struggle with,
Hmm.
and then reverse engineer, well, what do they have to do that thing? It'll break down in very specific ways. Number one, there are things that they do that you already know how to do. You just have to do more of them or do them more consistently.
True.
Then there are things that they do to get that belief, get that that station in life that you understand, you know about, but you don't know how to do. Right? Like I know how to ride a bicycle, so that would be in the first category. I can just go do that more.
Hmm.
I understand what riding a unicycle is, but I can't ride a unicycle. So if that was necessary, I would have to learn how to do that, right? So for you, it could be get better at math or learn law or whatever the thing is, right? Something you have to learn how to do. Then there are also going to be things that you didn't know you needed to do,
Hmm.
and some of them you know how to do, but you just didn't realize they were part of this process. Some of them you don't. So there are four different categories of kind of skills you may have to learn. I'll give a really rote, simple example for listeners. Like if I want to get a really good basketball player, if let's say I'm 10 years old and I want to get to be a really good basketball player, I can buy a book by Kobe Bryant or buy a book or watch a series of videos by Steph Curry or something like that and say, okay, let me see how they did it, and then download the kinds of workouts that Steph did and watch videos of him. And some of this stuff I'll know how to do. Like I know how to dribble a ball and I know how to shoot. I just have to practice the way they practice. But some of the things I don't know how to do because I've never done them and I have to take those on. So modeling is one piece. And the reason it's easiest for people is it's hardest to believe that you can do something that you've never seen somebody do before.
Right. That's true.
We probably all heard the 4 minute mile story. But if your listeners haven't, have you ever talked about the 4 minute
No, I
mile on the
haven't.
show? So I'm going to totally butcher the year, but if you give me a second here, um, if we can look up what year the 4 minute mile was broken, and by whom. So there were 100 years of human history around track and Olympias and stuff like that. Yeah, thank you. That where people believed you could never run, humans were not able to run a 4 minute mile. And there was so much science that was developed around like the way our bone and mass structure connects with muscle and tissue. There was really this belief that humans couldn't, like, if you started running and you tried to run faster than four, your body would fail. And nobody could break it, right? 401, 402, but nobody could break the 4 minute mile. And then um, somebody finally broke it. And the moment somebody broke it, I think it was like 3:57, right? They just barely made it to the other side of the 4 minute mile. Um, it was in 1954 by Roger Bannister. There you go. Thank you. So in 1954, Roger Bannister just broke the 4 minute mile. It was the first time in history somebody had done it. If memory serves me, I think in the next year, five more people broke the 4 minute mile. So it had never been done before because we couldn't do it. And then one person did it, and all of a sudden, other people could do
Everyone's
it,
gonna do it.
right?
Yeah,
Because it's hardest to accomplish something you've never seen somebody do.
makes sense.
Think about that. That's a matter of belief.
It is a belief. Yeah.
When you don't believe something is doable, it's hard for you to do. So modeling works for transformation because it's easier for you to believe you can do something if somebody else had done it before. So that's the easiest one, and there are other ones that I talk about in the book.
This is awesome. So I have a question in regards to your acronym, the Explore, Accept, Transform. As far as the transformation in your personal story, do you have somebody that you modeled or something that you modeled to get you to where you're at today?
Great, great question. The answer is yes, but it's had to continuously shift in terms of who are the people that I
Mhm.
model. Um, I'll give one example from the recovery, and I'll give another example from the more recent, like let's say, decade around personal beliefs. So when I was in recovery, and this people do this in 12 step. I don't follow the 12 steps anymore, but my first 3 years in recovery were in traditional recovery in 12 steps. I had a sponsor who was a guy I really liked. He played music. I played music. We connected really well. Um, and so, yeah, what I modeled at the time was just he would help me know what to do by telling me what he did, and I would do the same thing. I'm sure I served that purpose for some of the people who follow me nowadays, whether it's executives or musicians or people that I work with on that front or people who just got out of prison. Um, when you don't know what isn't working, it's so much easier. You know how much easier it is to help somebody else because you can see so much more about other people's lives and recognizing your own.
Yes.
I've now got 20 years of experience in this. So I can sit with somebody and say, oh, here's where your hang up is. Here's where the hurdles are that you're struggling with. And then I can give them a couple of suggestions based on what I've seen or what other people have done around me and help them dig out of that. So I think that's part of the role I serve from others. I had that early in recovery. But I had a good friend. I just talked about this on another podcast about a month ago. His name's Chris Harder. He has a money podcast if anybody wants to pay attention to it. But he and I were at dinner. This is like 8 years ago now. But I always struggle with a scarcity mindset. Ironically, not done. I'm struggling with in this moment in my life, if I'm honest. But
Mhm.
it used to be much, much worse. I was always in fear that I was not going to have enough, that I was always on the other side of homelessness or losing everything I had.
Mhm.
And I went to dinner with Chris one time, and he always lives this story of abundance. And I asked him point blank, I go, how? What allows you to live in this place? And he gave me this example I give everybody here, but I heard this story and it shifted my understanding of how abundance might show up in my life. I grew up again. My mom was always scared that we didn't have enough. Everything was always budgeted. She knew everything down to the penny so that we would be okay, and always kind of had this leaning of scaring us that, we shouldn't mess up our credit and all these other things. So he said to me, look, imagine a painter goes to Michael's or goes to some craft store and buys $100 worth of supply, right? They buy a canvas and some paint. And then they go home, and over a week, they use the paint on the canvas and they paint a beautiful piece of art. And then they show it around, and a friend of a friend says, oh my God, I love this thing so much. Can I pay you money for it? And they go, oh, I've worked with it for a couple of weeks. Like, this is about how much I sell things for. And the person offers them $10,000 for the painting.
Mhm.
In one way, it seems like this person got over, right? The painter got over on the buyer, right? Because they only spent $100 on
Mhm.
supplies, and now they made $10,000 out of it. But when you think about it that way, like the painter had to get $10,000 from the buyer. The idea is if I, for every $1,000 I make, you have to lose $1,000, right? Because there's a limited pot of money. But there's another way to think about it. This is what Chris helped me with was if the buyer feels like this piece of art is worth $10,000, when they buy it, it is now $10,000 worth of beauty that they get to put on their
Yeah,
wall, right?
right,
And what the artist did is they put their energy into it. They put their talent, they put their beauty that we talked about earlier into this
right,
piece of canvas. And they essentially created $9,900 worth of energy on that canvas through the beauty that they
right.
created. Nobody lost money in the process, but all of a sudden, almost $10,000 worth of more value were created in the world. Now, I'm talking about money here directly. So when I go with work with a client, right? Like I charge ridiculous amounts of money now when I work with people, and I work with incredible people in the world, and it's sometimes it bothers me almost. But I've been working at this for 25 years, so it's like 25 years of effort and learning and experience that I'm putting into each session, and it's my
Mhm.
job to do a really good job there. But think about a marriage and the investment you put into your relationship,
Right,
right? Years and years of caring and love and attention that there's value. And so what
good.
Chris helped me kind of understand, and it's helped me for the last 10, 15 years of my life, is we get to create out of nothing value. And so money, love, care, attention, they're not
Mhm.
actually finite resources. They're infinite resources.
They are.
When you start looking at them as finite resources, you start fighting over them like they're finite. And then the belief thing that we talked about before comes into factor, and you see finite resources everywhere. But in reality, you can generate money, you can generate love, you can generate attention, you can generate caring. And that's, I believe that's part of what you do in this podcast, right? Is you work hard on it, you talk to guests, and then you create help and love and understanding for people in the world. And so that helped me in the last literally decade just move from a lot of scarcity into almost endless abundance.
Which is excellent. That's really beautiful to share. And it makes sense because initially when we were talking about shame, the scarcity mentality is also a derivative of shame and they come hand in
Absolutely.
hand. So it's just a different, just a tiny little different channel, but also the same frequency. It's really
Exactly.
incredible. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, what an incredible, amazing conversation we're having here. And so where can our viewers, our watchers, and our listeners get a hold of you if they need to, or get a hold of your book, Unhooked?
Yeah. So Unhooked is available on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, anywhere you go. The book is there. Please check it out. I'm on all social media as Dr. Adi Jaffe, DR, like your Dr. Adi Jaffe, Adijaffe. And then I've got a website called adijaffe.com.
Okay.
And if you are struggling with compulsive behaviors, addictions, things you want to kick, IGNTD.com. It stands for Ignited. IGNTD.com is where you can go get help for that.
Great. Well, thank you so much. So I have one last question. How do you want the world
Yeah.
to remember you?
Ooh. It's funny because my belief is the world isn't going to remember me anyway because it's not about me. So, I don't know if I care how much so much how the world remembers me. I'm a parent. I've got three kids and I've got a wife. I think more than anything, I want my kids to remember me as somebody who cared and had their best interest and supported them and wanted them to be their best. And that my wife feels like I was a good partner and somebody that she's happy she spent the vast majority of her life with.
That's beautiful. And I saw the pureness and the beauty coming
Mm,
out of you as you spoke. Well, I'll tell you this much, I'll remember you because you're
mm.
within my consciousness and within my energy, and we are all a part of universal, unifying one consciousness. So I'll never forget you or your energy. Thank you so much for sharing. And it's just really been an incredible journey of yours that you've gone through for a really beautiful reason. So I have a poem here that
Thank
I
you. Same to
wrote
you. Yeah, please.
dedicated to you. So
Yeah.
here we go. I didn't say your name correctly at first, but Adi, I can't forget. Right? Okay, Dr. Adi Jaffe. Through trials and turbulations, through sorrows and life's integrations, through lonely nights and inner fights, I've stepped into the boundless nature of what recovery unfolds. I've hung up my umbrella to give my wisdom to another fella, and in this newfound gift I call life, No longer do things cut like a knife, for it's in this strife that the present shines bright, and all of this for self-love. It's what I have left. It's what I might. And there you go.
Love that. And
Thank
I
you.
feel like I have to send you a beat so we can put that to music.
Oh, yeah. You do some beats. I would love that.
All right. I'll make sure I follow up and it'll come your way. Maybe we can you can
Yeah, we're
rap that
close
over
by.
and
I would
put it
love
next to
that.
the
That'd be
I love it.
incredible. Dr.
That's
Adi
awesome.
Jaffe, everybody here on a Little Less Fear podcast. Thank you so much for connecting with me and the whole wide world. Wishing you, your loved ones, love and light. Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me, man.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in to a Little Less Fear podcast. If you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button. Tell your friends and your family about a Little Less Fear podcast. And if you are interested in being on my show, feel free to leave me an email at a little less fear at gmail.com. Or if you have any questions or comments and you also want to leave me an additional message, you can also do so from my website, leaving an inquiry at www.alittlelessfear.com. You can get a copy of my book on Amazon, Amazon Kindle, and Amazon Kindle Unlimited, also titled A Little Less Fear. And thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate all the support. Leave me a review if you get a chance. I love to receive feedback, questions, and comments. And any way that I can be of support to you, please let me know. Thank you so much. I love you. Wishing you love, light, happiness, and many blessings your way.